Good evening and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. We have Miss Christie Wright, and she grew up in Chicago suburb, and after graduating from a small Illinois college, she moved down to Colorado Springs. She returned to school and earned a second degree in sociology/criminology from the University of Colorado. She worked for over 22 years in the criminal justice system in the Springs as a probation officer, so behave tonight, because she knows what she's doing. She has written 2 books, All That Lies Beneath and South Park Perils. These are available tonight to purchase after the presentation. Her 3rd and forthcoming book, which I see on the table, written with co-author Charles Price, I'm sorry, that's you, James, is about the Chaffee County, or they say Chaffee, and the water ditch wars in the 1870s. Christie is interim president of the Park County Local Historical Archives and now one of the curators with the Historical Society. This evening she will talk about Buckskin Joe, which is now a ghost town, worked by Alma. I'm sure you don't know where it is. Anyway, welcome Christie.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate everybody coming to hear about Buckskin Joe. I have a special guest here tonight. I would like to introduce just briefly Ethan Nightchild, who is the film director for the film Ghost Towns of the West. And you may have seen that movie a couple years ago at either the South Park City Museum or in Alma. So Ethan, could you stand up for a second? Thank you. So in trying to think how to present my program tonight, I decided that we're going to take a road trip. There is so much to see up in Buckskin Gulch, and I thought this might be the best way to give you just a taste of what's up there. So you can hitch up your wagon, or ladies, you can ride side saddle, and we are going to go 8 miles up County Road 8. Before we start our trip, I would like to mention a field trip that the Historical Society took 3 years ago under the direction of Pat Morrow, and we had a great time up in Buckskin Gulch. And here's a photo of our group. We had a good day and a good time, and maybe we'll do another one sometime. So the ghost town of Buckskin is a mile west of Alma. So we're going to go to the town of Alma, and then we're just going to turn right there on County Road 8, and up we go. So the first thing we're going to come to is a cabin there on the left. That cabin still stands, although it looks different now. There's a lot of stuff around it. It's privately owned. But the photo on the right, obviously, is a historical photo from our archives. And I think this is at what we call the mouth of the gulch, or the beginning of the gulch. And I found out that the town of Alma and the Alma Foundation have put in a bid to put in a park there called the Buckskin Gateway Park. So at some point there may be a new park there right at the beginning. Now, the mining camp of Buckskin Joe was settled, of course, because of mining. And the first mine that was discovered there was called the Phillips, later also called the Buckskin Joe mine. And the photo on the left I took from a distance. That is the Phillips mine. And then I also have a little topo map there showing the approximate location. I'm not going to tell you how to get there because it is privately owned. But I was lucky enough to get permission a couple years ago and go up there. It's quite a large area, and a lot of buildings. On the right there is what we call the adit, or the opening to the mine. So the mine still stands and is still privately owned. But this was the whole reason the entire gulch was settled, was because gold was discovered there at the Phillips. Now, the way gold was discovered was by a man named Joseph Higginbottom, or Higginbotham, but this is not him. So, I've never seen a photo of him. These are photos that you might find online that probably resemble what he looked like, and they're great classic photos of miners panning for gold. But this is not him. But he was a real man, and so in a book called The 1859 Mining Laws of Buckskin Joe, you can see on that top area there that it talks about Buckskin Joe Diggins. The mining area was often called the diggings in the early days. And so you can see that Joseph Higginbottom signed his name for one of the mines that he claimed. And then in the second article there, he actually signed it Buckskin Joe. And the bottom article, if you look way down at the bottom, you will see that J. Higginbottom was listed as one of the passengers on the stage. So he was a real man. A couple of varying stories about what happened to him in the end, but I've read that he died a pauper in Leadville. So our first stop is going to be the Buckskin Joe town site. And these are the only two known photos of the original town. Now these were taken by a Western photographer, George Wakely, in 1864. And Wakely, thank goodness, went around to a lot of the mining camps and took these photos. So these are the only two known to exist. And you've probably heard that Buckskin was originally called Lorette, two different spellings, and that is also true. So here's an article that explains how the town got its name. And you can see the letter is from Lorette, from the Buckskin Joe Gulch. And this article goes on to say how the town was named and that a group of citizens met at the recorder's office one day, and they wanted to honor the only two women living in the Gulch, if you can imagine. And those were the wives of two brothers who were early miners up there. Their last name was Dodge. And so one wife's name was Laura, and the other Annette, so they combined it to Lorette. And you know, I love these kind of articles because this article was written in 1860, but you know, this is primary source material and not legend. And so here we have, you know, a fact as to how the town was named. Now, just kind of a quick snapshot of Buckskin Joe, and again, this is just kind of an example of some of the articles that I have waded through and typed up and learned about Buckskin. But one of these says that there were 40 families there. You know, just you have to pull a variety of information out of the articles. But it's all very interesting to learn about one of our original towns. Now, I think you'll get a kick out of this because this is a plat of the town, if you can imagine. And I thought, my goodness, how ambitious. I mean, look at all those city blocks they've got. And they have a city park, and they have a mill site. And I've highlighted some of the names of the streets. So in the early days when Colorado was being settled, a lot of the towns put the word city after them. So Montgomery, which is at the bottom of Montgomery Reservoir now, that was actually called Montgomery City. And our archives has a map that shows Montgomery City with its plan. So, and Lorette, as you will see up there, was also the county seat of Park County. It was the second county seat. But the town never developed the way they hoped. Now, there were some important people up there in the early days, and I'm sure you will recognize Pa Tabor, excuse me, and his first wife, Augusta. This was their general store, and Augusta was the postmistress out of this. And this is also the area where their first and only son, Maxie, was born. And the Tabors lived up in Buckskin Gulch right up until the bitter end, about 1867. So they were early to come and late to leave, and then, as we all know, Ha went over the range to Leadville and became very rich. Another important person who was in Buckskin was Father Dyer. He was the itinerant preacher who skied over Mosquito Pass and carried the mail. And he has a direct connection here to Bailey because his sister was Elizabeth Enterkin. And her cabin on the left there, bottom left, is in McGraw Park. So we can assume that he probably traveled through Bailey fairly frequently to visit his sister. And another person I found out who was in Buckskin, I just learned this week, is Charles Knoptrieb, who you may know of the little town of Nathrop, just south of Beauty on 285. And so Charles Knoptrieb mined in Buckskin before he went down to Chaffee County. Now he had a huge ranch right at the mouth of Chalk Creek Canyon. This is a painting of what his, and he had a big flour mill there. So this is a painting of the mill and his house, and the house still stands. And I was lucky enough to meet with the owner last year and go in there. And it's just beautiful property. This is one of his pastures, right off of 285. Just gorgeous. So, what happened to Buckskin? Bottom photo is what it looks like now. And as most of the mines and towns in Park County, it fell victim to the proverbial boom and bust cycle. So here's a list of a lot of the ghost towns now in Park County. Few are inhabited, most are not. There's hardly anything left. So Buckskin Joe certainly was not the only town that, withered away. Two of the buildings were saved, and the general store that I just showed you was moved down to the Royal Gorge, to the Buckskin Joe Frontier Town when that was in existence. And on the bottom right is what it looked like after they fixed it up. And it was down there many years. But in 2010, it was privately purchased, the entire town. And the whole town was moved down to Paonia by, you may have heard of Bill Koch and his brother. Yeah, so they bought the whole shooting match, literally. And they moved the entire Royal Gorge, the Buckskin Joe Frontier Town, down to his private ranch. And he's the one that also bought the original Billy the Kid tintype in Denver at an auction for $2.3 million. So, some people say that it's good at least the buildings are being preserved, but unfortunately, the public can't look at them anymore. But the good news is the courthouse from Lorette or Buckskin is now in the South Park City Museum. And it's great. The interior is all fixed up like the courtroom, and they've done a really great job with it. So our second stop is going to be the cemetery. And as you're going up County Road 8, look for this little wagon wheel with the number 1. And that corresponds with the Forest Service Auto Gulch tour that they have on Buckskin. They have about 8 of these, and you can get these brochures at the Forest Service office. This is the sign in front of the cemetery that says it was established in 1902. However, since we know the town of Buckskin was settled in about 59 or 60, we could assume that the cemetery, came along about that time. So I was able to find this article saying that the town of Buckskin has been enlarged to take in the graveyard for the convenience of burying purposes the coming winter. And I don't know how that could be convenient to bury someone up there in the winter, because I hiked in there and it is cold and the snow is deep. But so at least we have proof that the cemetery was in existence in 1863. So I've made a list of some of the causes of death of people buried in Buckskin from the 1800s. And as you will see, most of it, it looks like, is from illness. I mean, there's some that are a little different, some mining accidents, but most of it was illness back then. Now, the cemetery was surveyed a couple of years ago, so we do have a map of it in our archives. And the Buckskin Joe Cemetery is what's called a mountain cemetery. There's no particular pattern to the burials. People are just buried naturally among the natural, grasses and trees. And that is in contrast to the enormous Fairmount Cemetery in Denver, which was laid out literally like a park. And so these were called park cemeteries. But you can see, Fairmount has a memorial terrace and gardens, and of course Buckskin Cemetery is nothing like that. And thank goodness. I'll tell you about a couple of interesting burials up there, and these are also in my little cemetery book there. Doc Lockridge was his nickname. He was one of 2 Confederate soldiers buried in Buckskin. He and his 5 brothers, if you can imagine, served in the war from the state of Virginia. And I find this one interesting. I call it, "Where is Billy Buried?" Because you'll see in the little notice on the left that it says his body was taken to Denver for burial, and yet I have a photo of his funeral home marker in the Buckskin Cemetery. So, not quite sure where Billy is, but I think he's in Buckskin. Now this one, I will read this to you, and you may have seen a clue a couple slides back, but I'll read this to you and then tell you what happened. "Alas, 'twas lost, life's fleeting pleasure, when there was made an unwise wager. And with remorse and deep regret, he lost his life, but he won the bet." And you may have seen what the bet was. He's the one who drank laudanum, which was liquid opium mixed with morphine, all in a liquid form, tincture of opium, on a dare. So he won the bet, but I'm sure he died a very painful death right after. And Squire was married to Christine Middleton, who's sitting in the middle, and she is part of the Snell family in Alma, who was a very prominent family up there. So that is the lady he left as his wife and widow. Now another person who drank laudanum, and this photo's on the cover of my book, was Ralph Minahan, not Moynihan, but Minahan. Ralph was a young man, he was in his 20s, and he went to a dance one night in Fairplay, and he had his eye on a lady who rebuffed him, and he drank laudanum and killed himself. Now this is always an interesting headstone, and people who post photos of the Buckskin Cemetery online often will include this, and everyone wonders what this is about. Well, I was able to meet Michael Riesbeck, who was in Fairplay a couple of years ago. So I said, "Mike, what is on that headstone?" And he just explained that that was something he and his wife Carol said to each other before they fell asleep at night. I guess they just talked, and then it was time to go to sleep. So that was a saying, just between the two of them. And so now it's immortalized there. Buckskin Cemetery are these little posts that are hammered into the ground, and then they have these like metal dog tags around them with numbers, but there's no list that has names that correspond to the numbers. So we don't know who's buried there, but there's quite a few of these, about 15, and just another oddity. And sometimes I see online people will say that there's really old burials in Buckskin and that the headstones say 1862 or 1860. But I would challenge you to find any headstone up there that says that they died in the early 1860s. They may have been born, but I have not seen any saying that people have died in those early years. And I think the reason why is probably they used wood markers, and as you can see on the right, and the photo on the left is the same marker, but they just deteriorate so quickly, you know, in the mountain air up there. I don't even know if I could find this one. That's from about 6 years ago. So, and this headstone, Lucille Hammond, this was stolen and cracked in two. And Eric Swanson, who was the caretaker of the cemetery for many years, he was able to get it back and put it back together and put it back in the cemetery. But he has a funny little story about it, that a little bird came and sat on his shoulder while he was doing that and was twittering in his ear, and so he kind of felt like it was Lucille thanking him for putting her headstone back together. You know, the Buckskin Cemetery just has amazing stories. I could tell you lots more, but I'll show you the Swanson headstone there, which is the largest, and the angel on top is on the back of my book. And of course, we can't talk about the Buckskin Cemetery without talking about Silver Heels. So here is Mount Silver Heels, named in her honor. You've probably heard the legend, but here it is on the left, if you can read it through really quickly. She was a dancer who arrived on the stage up in Buckskin. A beautiful lady, and she loved to dance and wore silver heels or silver slippers. And supposedly there was a smallpox epidemic, and she nursed the miners. She herself got smallpox. She left. She couldn't be found. But people thought they saw her in the cemetery weeping for her miner friends who had died. And supposedly a collection was taken up to, help her out, but she could never be located. But this collection is, I think, very suspect because as the story goes, and you can Google this and find it online and find it in history books, that Senator Wolcott is supposedly the one who initiated the $1,000 for her, for her gift, but he would have been age 14. So I don't think he was a senator. And he didn't come to Colorado until he was 31, so that doesn't really make sense. But then I found the little article on the right saying that there was a new town that was going to be at the mouth of Buckskin called Wolcott. So why in the world would they name it that unless it was after the senator? So another mystery. The gentleman on the left is Frank Mayer. His house is also in the South Park City Museum, and he claimed to have seen her step off the stage in Buckskin Joe. But, her identity has always been a bit of a mystery. Some people have researched and thought her name was Gerda Bechtel from Pennsylvania, but she's been very hard to trace. So, not being one to squash a legend, I will leave it to your own opinion there. But this was the dance hall, the Silver Heels dance hall that was in Buckskin, supposedly where she danced. And here's an image. This is from a publication by History Colorado, just kind of showing what that might have looked like. It's rather ornate. I don't think that cabin we just saw would have had furnishings in there. Anyway, artist rendition. But you know, there's a number of books out now about Buckskin Joe and Silverheels. So the book at the top left is about the South Park City Museum. The book in the middle was written by a gunfighter, an actor, who worked at the Royal Gorge for many years, and he's written a book about all the scary stories, ghost stories, that happened down there. The book on the right is historical fiction, and that won an award, and then the book at the bottom is fairly new, and I understand has also won an award. So there are some books out now about buckskin and Silverheels. So now we're going to take a quick stop at the mines. You know, and as you go up and up and up Buckskin Gulch, I snagged this off of Google Earth, so it's a little distorted. But, you know, you'll see the mountains, you'll see some of the mines up there, you see the beautiful valley, but what you don't see is the plain map. I think every patch of dirt up there is probably planed. So, yeah. It was a very productive mining district, and this is what the maps look like. And that, what I just showed you, is taken off. This map is probably about 6 feet long, which includes Montgomery, Buckskin, and Mosquito. It's a huge, huge area. A couple of the important mines up there. One was the Criterion, and these photos are from our archives. I've enlarged that one on the left, and I counted 15 men, 15 miners, and one woman in a white apron who was probably the cook. So she must have had her hands full. And then the photo on the right is of Criterion Lake, which is right next to it. And Criterion Lake still exists, and it's still very clear. Another early mine was the Excelsior Group. And you can see in the middle photo and the photo on the left, the shaft house was there next to that building at one point, and the hoist machinery was there. But the color photo I took just a couple of years ago, and the shaft house is no longer there. And actually the little cabin is not there, and don't you want to know what's there? The bubble house. Yeah. You know, I'm sure it's environmentally friendly. I will, again, leave it to your judgment if you think that fits in with the mining district. So that was private property that was sold. Probably the most famous mine up Buckskin is the Sweet Home, where our state mineral, rhodochrosite, came from. And Brian Lees was the miner who discovered that a number of years ago. Here's what it looks like today on the left. All there is just a building there along the side of the road. The photo on the right shows where the mine was, up behind the building. Now this mine, the Hungry Five, wasn't particularly productive, I don't think, but it hangs on the side of the mountain, and it's just quite the sight. It's right behind the Paris Mill, and I have a friend who hikes up there. He's like a mountain goat, and so he said I could show his photos. It gives you a little bit closer look at those buildings just hanging off the edge. Now, mining was a dangerous activity, and so I'll tell you just a couple of burials in Buckskin. This gentleman, James Frazier, was mining, and he fell down a winze, which is a hole in the floor of a tunnel, and they think his candle went out and he didn't see it. Usually there's ladders, but not always. And so he fell to his death and is buried in Buckskin. And this poor guy, oh, this is a crazy story. He, I don't know that he was mining in that particular place, but at the end of the day, he wanted to get down the mountain, and and it was in June, and there were a lot of boulders and a lot of snow. But he took it upon himself to slide down on his shovel. So he sat on his shovel and started down, and as you can imagine, he caused his own landslide, an avalanche, which overtook him, and he was buried in all the debris. And so the quote at the top up there is what one of his friends said after they dug him out. So it was dangerous work. And unfortunately, more recently, my dear friend Kevin Lawrence was killed up in Buckskin, probably, to this day, 4 years ago. He was working his mine, the Ajax, and you may have read about it. It took about a week for them to recover the body because it was so hard to get up there, at this time of year. So the danger still continues, unfortunately. So our next stop is the Paris Mill. But before we get there, right before the Paris Mill, look for this wagon wheel number 2, and in the creek there on the left is the Arastra. So historic photo and present day photo. So you'll have to get out of your car and actually, go look down in the creek there, but there it is, still there.
What do they do?
Well, the water ran a turnstile that went around and grabbed the ore. So here's a photo of the Paris Mill. It's falling down, but the good news is the county now owns it, and it is being restored one wing at a time. So I'll give you just a couple photos here. It just shows the degree of deterioration over the years. Here's the back side. Up at the top there is where the tram came in, and you can see how it's fallen down. This is a schematic of the interior. And I love this photo because this shows the man actually working the tram cable. And then the photo on the right is the terminal up at the top. So we're going to take a little detour now at the Paris Mill. We're going to go up to Windy Ridge, up to the bristle cones. I don't know if you've been up there, but these are amazing. They literally crawl along the ground. It is just so bizarre, so twisted, and so beautiful. Makes for great photography.
Is it because of the winds?
Well, and the nature of the tree. The park was established up there in 1964. And I think these trees up there have been dated to about 2,000 years old. This is up above them looking down. If you do go up there, I suggest you take a 4-wheel, 4x4. It's got a pretty steep incline going up to the actual parking lot for the park. Just FYI. So we're going to go up and up, and as we go up County Road 8, you'll see the beautiful scenery. There's a mining building. I don't know what mine this was for, but it's right along the road there. I took this, many years ago. There's all kinds of interesting mining structures up there. And then right before we get to the top, there's an area you'll see where all the trees are chopped down. And I think this is where Timberline Town was, which was a small settlement up there where they did some lumbering. And there was actually an elderly woman who lived up there all alone. And periodically you'll read about Timberline Town in Buckskin. And I prowled around down near the bottom there and found a couple of remains, I think, of old buildings. So I'm pretty sure that's where it was. And then almost at the top, there was this mill, no longer there. The only thing there now is there's some concrete foundations there, but that's it. The entire mill is gone. This was the Kentucky Bell Mill for the mine of the same name. And finally, 8 miles later, we get to the top, and here is Kite Lake, literally shaped like a kite. And it hasn't changed much over the last 100-some years. But the parking lot for Kite Lake is the trailhead for what they call the decalibron. You know, people who like to hike 4 14ers in a day. Yeah, those people. So do not go up there on the 4th of July weekend because I think there's about 200 cars up there parked parallel along the road. And so only one car can go up. So if someone's going up, the person can't get down and vice versa. You can't really see what's coming. It's so crowded up there. Oh my gosh. And again, a claim map, you know, you see the mountains, but here's all the mines that are staked up there. So that's most of my presentation. I do have my cemetery book and my outlaw book for sale. And I also have a book that our archives published last summer, and this was through Arcadia Publishing. I will sell it for $20 tonight. Normally it's about $25 with tax. But this is one of those photo history books that you've probably seen. They publish these on many different areas, and so we were lucky enough to have one done on Park County. And people ask what I'm working on, so I've told some people, but I have a co-author, Charles Price, who wrote a wonderful book about the Espinosa brothers, and he asked me to co-author his next book. So we are going to call it Most of the People Were Outlaws. And this is about what's called the Lake County War, which really happened in Chaffee County. But Chaffee County didn't become Chaffee until 1879. But this is about a water ditch war that ended up in lynchings and hangings, and Father Dyer's son, Judge Dyer, actually was shot and killed in his own courtroom in the little town of Granite. So that's what this is going to be about. So that's my program. I will be happy to take some questions. I can see everybody now. Any questions? Yes, Craig.
How much gold did Buckskin produce?
Well,
Or was it all gold, or?
it was gold and silver. And then in the early 1900s, it was tungsten was found up there. Who knew? You could pick it right up off the ground. In the 60s, I think the Phillips produced 500,000 in the early 60s. So if you can translate that into what that would be today, it would be quite a bit. You know, I have a chart about what the total production was. I don't have that off the top of my head a little bit. It was a profitable mining industry.
Well, let's all thank Christie for being here. Buckskin Joe. And I have a question about one of the cabins in South Park City. Jim Sapp. The one that you mentioned was moved to South Park City. Jailhouse, courthouse? Okay. We can all go see that. Okay. Pardon?
That's a great book.
Yeah. Okay, thank you everyone for coming. It was a great evening, a great turnout. Food was awesome. It's almost all gone, so we know it was great. This is a really good thing. Thank you, Jim Sapp and Patsy, as always. Thank you, Craig, for setting up. Thank you, Peter Watson, for your contribution, as always. Jim and Sue Gwen, and Karen, Reese, and Tony, whoever I missed. Actually, Linda Wood brought cookies too, which is great. It's all gone. So again, thank you so much, and our next presentation will be in April. I forgot the date, y'all have to email on it. So that's it. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and drive home safely.
what's the next presentation?
Just so you guys all know, next presentation is Pete addressed the unmeasured geology part of the Park County. And that's all we have right on there. Thank you.